Welcome to Fortress of Faith with Tom Wallace, calling North America to repentance and revival.
Welcome back to the Corner of Truth and Courage. You're listening to Fortress of Faith. We're keeping an eye on what's going on over in Iran, and according to some news reports, this is coming out of the Guardian newspaper, which is a very legitimate news organization in the United Kingdom, and reports are coming out that the dictatorship that the people of Iran are under through the supreme leader, the Ayatollah Khomeini, that they are increasing executions of people that they believe are political enemies. They're trying to make sure, in hopes that there is not going to be an uprising in their country to try to take him out. And so they are intensifying their lockdown, their crackdown with executions and mass arrest. Over 705 arrests of political prisoners are being reported. You know, they are certainly feeling the pinch over there that their days are numbered. And this is, sadly, a typical action of a dictator. And in Islam, they don't understand. You know, you look at just about any Islamic nation, they do not really truly operate, you know, as a democratic republic like what we have. When you mention democracy to a Muslim, and by the way, here in America, we do not live under a democracy. We are a republic that uses the democratic process to elect representation, people that will represent us in government. That's what a republic is. And we've given balance and checks in our government with three powers. You got the executive office, you got the legislative branch, and the judicial branch. And giving the power to the people, like what we have here in America, was a very foreign idea to the rest of the world. In fact, most of the other governments, when America was being born about 250 years ago with this type of government, everyone said, it won't work, it will fail. Europe was used to having a monarchy, kings and queens and so on there, but then even they found in Europe that they also needed to have representation of the people. And so we had the parliamentary style. So a blending of democratic processes began with a monarchy. Some countries in the Middle East, some Muslim countries, that's what they have. That's what they're going to have over in Jordan. They don't quite have that in Saudi Arabia, but it's leaning and moving more and more in that direction. And Iran used to have that. Iran used to have a monarch, the Shah, which means king. Reza Pahlavi Mohammad Reza Pahlavi was the king, and then but Jimmy Carter was largely responsible for him being thrown out. Now, the king had made some mistakes, and he was actually doing some things that was brutal to his own people to try to bring reforms that his country felt needed. And so he had some missteps. We can't gloss over that. But in doing so, when they threw him out, it gave opportunity for the Ayatollah Khomeini to come into power. Now, he had been put in exile for a number of years, thrown out of his country because of his violent views. He spent most of his time in Turkey and Iraq, and then at the end, he spent his time over in France, in Paris. What's interesting, what I find very kind of interesting right now, the Crown Prince, His Royal Highness, the Crown Prince, Reza Pahlavi, is currently in France. He's been exiled out of his country since 1979, thrown out with his father, the whole family was, and they've been exiled largely in the United States. He's been living in Virginia, just below the Beltway, and is a big fan of of America and of the type of government that we have, and is very favorable of Israel, will be a friend to Israel. Well, he is preparing himself to return into government. If you've been listening to our broadcast, we've been talking about this. But what's interesting is that he's now moved to France. And I think there's a reason for it. I mean, when the Ayatollah Khomeini returned to Iran out of exile, he came from France. He flew in on Air France. Did he go to France for this particular reason, to kind of relive and to replay what was done in 1979? An exiled leader who came in to become the leader came in from Paris, France. Will this happen again? Could be. I just thought it was kind of interesting to see him now reporting from France. Okay, since we're talking about what's going on overseas, I want to weigh in on what's going on in England. I have, for many years now on the radio, been sharing with you the concerning direction that Europe is moving in countries like England, which I lived in for 29 years. Although I was born in America, an American citizen, lived in England for 29 years. I had permanent residence there since I was 16 years of age, and most of my education was over there in the country. It is sad to see the direction that it's been moving in. And I've been warning us here in North America to watch what's going on in Europe, because if we do not mend our ways, if we don't correct the directions we're heading, we are following Europe. And what we're seeing coming out of Europe right now is very scary. A lot of it has to do with the growth of Islam over there. And they just had a concert there that the BBC did a live coverage of this concert in Glastonbury. And in the concert, they're screaming, and this is on British TV, on the British Broadcasting Company. This is a state-owned TV station. And in the concert, they're screaming on live TV, "Death, death to IDF," which is the Israeli Defense Force. And this goes on for a while. And this, they don't cut transmission. They don't, this is on live TV, an event happening in Britain calling for the death of the Israel Defense Force. Now, this, of course, during the time of the Israel-Iraq War. But, this is what happens when you have a country that has permitted a great host, a number of Muslims to immigrate into your country, and then they've been procreating while they're there. You allow them to have their own Sharia law courts. They can have up to 4 wives. Legally, in England now, polygamy is practiced and accepted in Britain. Britain just kind of, these are Muslims and this is their Islamic law, and they're doing it in their court system. And so we allow that here. Now, of course, they cannot afford their many wives. So guess who pays for that? The taxpayer. They're all on the dole. And the average children that they have per wife will be about 4 to 5 kids. And so they make a pretty good living on the government, and they're being funded by the British to do it. And guess how they vote? They vote against the British ways and for Muslim ways every time. And, the most popular name for baby boys in Britain has been Mohammed. And this has been over a decade, for over 10 years. That's been a true fact. Most of the schools, first graders, second grades, and third grades now, are over 50% of them. Most schools in London are Muslim. You can see the handwriting on the wall. But not only is it just going in that direction, but you see some crazy liberal ideologues out there, and there's so much against Christians that Christians who are praying for the slaughter of unborn babies are being arrested, and here's their crime. They have walked within so many feet of an abortion clinic, and these Christians are not saying anything. They're not carrying anything. They're not obstructing anyone's from free travel in the area. They're just simply standing there and praying silently in their head, praying for the unborn that are about to be murdered, and they're being arrested. Yeah. And I'm thankful for J.D. Vance, who made a speech over in Europe not too long ago in February, and he brought attention in his speech there in Munich. He brought attention to one of the men, Smith Connor, who's been arrested and fined close to $11,000 because he was in the buffer zone praying. Yeah. You can now be charged with a criminal offense in England for your thoughts, for something you do in your head. You can't make this up. They also arrested another lady, and fortunately, she had representation by the ADF, which has come, the Alliance Defense Fund there, who came to her, her aid, and sued the police department for unlawful arrest of this woman. And the West Midlands police had to pay out £13,000 to this Christian volunteer for that there. And so hopefully this man, Connor, he'll get his case overturned, and the the police being put in their place. I have two pastor friends in England that were told by the police, you cannot be handing out tracts here. Now, this is probably 20 years ago now. 20 years ago. They were told they were going, this was in Birmingham, they were ministering, and they simply were handing out Christian literature, which is, still supposed to be legal over there. But the police told them, you can't do that here. This is a Muslim zone. Muslim zone. Never heard of that before. And of course, the police department was charged for unlawful activity there against the citizens, and they were sued, and the police lost. And so, folks, yeah. But, the pushback against Christianity is growing, and Islam is getting, we saw the Muslims chanting in the streets with signs, behead those who insult Islam, and the police did not arrest one of them. Not one. They all looked the other way. When Muslims do so, but if the Christians go out and protest, they get arrested and fined and so on. That's it for today. We're going to keep an eye on these things. Join us again tomorrow at the corner of Truth and Courage. God bless you.